I am extraordinarily pleased to introduce our next speaker. As you all are very well aware, from our last panel especially, equity and justice are key focus for not only EPA, but all of its sister agencies as well. So making sure all voices are heard and that every community has equal access to opportunities is a key focus for this administration. In November of 2021, President Biden appointed Daniel Blackman to serve as the Regional Administrator for EPA Region 4. Daniel has dedicated his career to creating economic opportunities for marginalized communities throughout the South, specifically in building more resilient communities with equitable economic opportunity, greater access to education, and health environment for all, not just a few. From advocating on behalf of Georgia ratepayers and small businesses in energy-related matters before Georgia's PSC, to working closely with EPA Region 4 on issues including water infrastructure, clean air, and land and emergency management policies that impacted the Southeast during the Obama administration, Daniel brings with him experience on a wide array of environmental issues, as well as a passion for environmental justice. Daniel is here today to provide us with an update on environmental justice and other issues from the region. So please welcome Daniel to our conference stage.
Was trying to put my Southern hospitality into practice and help her down the stage, but she didn't want it, so I mean, I'm gonna still feel welcomed in Kentucky. How are you all doing? Look, guys, I'm the only thing hooked in between you and lunch. I'm gonna ask you that one more time. I have 2 more cities to be in before I get to go home. How are you all doing? There you go. Thank you for the energy, and I must say that F-150 can go. Don't ask me how I know. I did hit the gas a little bit. Well, not the gas, but hit the pedal a little bit. But no, on a serious note, I want to thank you so much to Brian, my colleague, who was just here. I want to say thank you to EPA Region 4. Dave, if you will raise your hand, that's the guy you bug on my way out to make sure that you can get in touch with me, David Chappelle. Why I call you Chappelle? David Champagne. I might need to hit a reset. No. On a serious note, guys, I'm so privileged to be here. We were in Louisville yesterday with the recognition and acknowledgement, which I'll touch on a stadium and through our Brownfields program. And it's really an honor to be here. And I'll share a quick story with you. My honeymoon after I got appointed by the president in November ended very early on December 10th when Kentucky was flooded. And I want to thank you all for the service that you provide, because Kentucky is very important to this region, so much so that I made a commitment the first time I was here. I don't see Tony Haddon. Is Tony here? Oh, there you go, Tony. Tony is my guy, man. Tony is a really, really good person. And Tony knows I threw myself out there with one of our first state directors meetings, and I took a pretty tough call. And Tony has always picked up his phone. Sometimes I've called Tony just to say hello, and other times it's to let Tony know that he has the full support of our region, of the president, and of Administrator Michael Regan. So again, on behalf of EPA, I want to thank you. I want to thank our federal partners, Department of Energy. We appreciate you all being here. We thank you for the time. And I want to thank Secretary Goodman. I thank you so much. I preemptively took some of that water so I didn't get choked up out here, so that Kentucky water works. Thank you for you being here, for your leadership, for the commitment. We would not be as strong as a federal agency without the partnerships that exist within states like Kentucky. And to Governor Andy Beshear, who I know was able to join us virtually, we thank Governor Beshear, the Kentucky commissioners, deputy commissioners, executive directors. Thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. And there are a couple of things that I want to cover. But first, I want to acknowledge the students and the young people that have been a part of these phenomenal programs. We are experiencing, not only in EPA as a region, but we're experiencing throughout our country at the state and federal level mass exodus of some very talented people. And we know that those positions are going to need to be filled. And my grandfather, who was a diplomat to the United Nations, there is a quote on the sustainable goals that say we are well able to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own. Our goal is not only to be here in states like Kentucky and to work with you all hand in hand, but to recruit the future. to make sure that students like the young lady I met, wave your hand in the back and tell me your name again. Hannah, I low-key offered her a job in the back, so I'm trying to see if she's going to take me up on my offer. You got to sneak those things in when you find talented people, because I know that she probably wants to stay in Kentucky. Maybe we can work it out, but I'm going to try and see what we can do on her end. But it's really a pleasure to be able to be here with you all, because there's so much great work that can be done through partnerships. And I know that Governor Beshear mentioned some of the challenges in Kentucky with the flooding and with some of the more historic areas, not only with the tornadoes and the challenges that you all have faced, but I think it's important for us to know how exciting of a time this is. An opportunity for us to address environmental justice issues, climate issues. It was mentioned in Justice 40, which I'll touch on, our ability to focus on underserved communities, on areas that have been, quite frankly, left out of the conversation for so long. There's a quote that I generally give that says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And too many folks that have not been able to receive federal funding, to receive the support and the resources, cities where there are mayors and there are local leaders that don't have the capacity to write a competitive grant. Our goal and our focus is to help to change that narrative by focusing in on what President Biden has mentioned as a whole of government approach through interagency collaboration, through our focus on working with the Department of Energy, with HUD, with other agencies. It's so critical at this moment to not just give the numbers that I'm about to share with you all, but to recognize our most precious natural resource, which is our children and our grandchildren, to make sure that our communities, whether rural or urban, have an opportunity each and every day to be a part of this historic bipartisan infrastructure funding, the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure Reduction Act. I mean, these are all areas of historic funding. As a matter of fact, the state of Kentucky gets $113 million per year for the next 5 years on water infrastructure alone. We were very privileged through the bipartisan infrastructure law to receive $50.6 billion in water infrastructure, and 113 of which per year, almost 600 million will go into the state of Kentucky. And we're very proud of that, because we know climate resilience, as the Secretary mentioned earlier, is critical. Being able to address climate resilience, to put our communities in a position to recover faster. As you can imagine, having the largest of the 10 EPA regions, Region 4 is the southeastern United States, which includes North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. We also have 6 federally recognized tribes. And as you all can imagine, you can stick your hand in a hat and pick out an issue, whether it's the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi, or it's Lowndes County, Alabama, or Eastern Kentucky. We have our work cut out for us. So I want to first start off by saying thank you again to the leadership in this room for allowing us to be good partners to you, as much as we accept you all as partners to our agency, to our region, to our democracy. First and foremost, I want to, touch back on this National Brownfields Conference that we had in Oklahoma a couple of months ago. And yesterday, we had an exciting opportunity to meet with Jeff Mosley and Bill Johnston, who gave a presentation on Brownfields National Conference, and they won our Phoenix Award. And this Lynn Family Stadium, which is a facility in Louisville, which we're very proud of. I had a chance to meet with the mayor and to see some of what our work is doing throughout the state of Kentucky and in other areas. I think one of the greatest tragedies to our service, all of us in this room, whether you're on the program or you're an attendee, is that the crisis, the pandemic, for so long did not afford us the opportunity to be in rooms like this. And probably one of the greatest things I can say since I have been a regional administrator is our ability to travel. I do travel extensively, but there's nothing like walking in a community and making sure they know that we're there to help them. There's nothing like being able to be in a room full of leaders like this and not wear my badge and hear good conversations about what people are doing, and to be really intentional about seeing the programs on what these kids are doing and how they're building electric vehicles in elementary school and high school. I have 3 sons, all of age, which will probably race those up and down our street if they had them for themselves. But the reality of it, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're living in a time where we have to bring the next generation into this conversation. But more than anything else, we have to also be inclusive of the low and moderate income communities that Justice 40 aims to have an impact on. This city has so much history and so much value and so much prestige beyond bourbon and horses. I know it's a lot of good things that are here, but there's also a great and resilient community of leaders, and that's why we came back. And I want to tell you, Tony, from the first time that you and I have been speaking, Kentucky has been a special place. And I don't just say that because I'm in this room with you all, but because of the fact that from the time we've come here, we have been in rooms like this where there's been so many people that represent different industries and different backgrounds that we believe through partnership, through working together with resources, can help us to transform not only Kentucky and not only the region, but can help us to transform our country. And the truth and the reality of it is, I think that states like this and regions like Region 4 can be a blueprint for the rest of the country, right? The blessing and the curse in which we stand on today is that we have an array of resources and opportunities within Region 4. The challenge is we also have some of the most impacted environmental justice communities. And that's a huge challenge because the burden that we all share is to build something better for generations to come. There's a Native American proverb, since I mentioned those 6 federally recognized tribes, that says that a Native American proverb that really holds close to where I'm at about how we treat generations, right? It says that we do not inherit the planet from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So this conversation and what we're doing here is not just for us, it's to make things better for the communities that we serve. And I'm very proud to announce today that on September 24th of this year in Warren County, North Carolina, Administrator Michael Regan opened and really started and spearheaded a phenomenal opportunity where we launched the Office of Environmental Justice and Civil Rights within the Environmental Protection Agency, and with a specific focus on external civil rights, on making sure that our communities, especially those in low and moderate income communities, have the same ability to compete every day. For our students that come from many of these zip codes that have a chance to go to the University of Louisville, the University of Kentucky, Kentucky State University, we want to make sure that the talent that those young men and women have in those institutions can go back into the zip codes that need to be rebuilt, that need their leadership, that needs their commitment. And we can do it with the talent in this room, with students like yourself, with individuals like those who represent the best of what Kentucky has to offer. The Office of Environmental Justice and Civil Rights will promote the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of people with respect not only to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies, but we're also committed to make sure that we elevate environmental justice in a space, to your question earlier, of making sure that there's a succinct definition of how federal agencies will work together. My goal, one of my highest priorities as a regional administrator, is to make sure that regardless of an administration, our policies, our practices, and our intent can be transferable between administrations. One of the biggest challenges of being a presidential appointee or being in a position like mine is that I serve at the liberty of the president. When the president is no longer in the Oval Office, there may very well be someone else here. And we have to be able to rise above any partisanship so that the folks that live in states like Kentucky, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, these communities need our support. This is more of a marathon than a sprint. What we have to accomplish transcends an administration, but also transcends the way in which we think about environmental justice, rebuilding communities, restructuring communities, repositioning communities. We've got over $1.5 billion for brownfields, $3.5 billion for community revitalization and infrastructure. That includes communities like those in eastern Kentucky, communities like those in western Louisville that need our support. But our goal and our objectives are only as strong as the partnerships that we build. And this elevation of environmental justice and external civil rights will place this critical work and equal structural footing on the Office of Air, Water, and the EPA's other national programs and initiatives, which aim to improve and enhance the agency's ability to infuse these opportunities within areas. I had a recent meeting with several of the mayors throughout Mississippi and other areas that had a really simple question. They said, Daniel, we hear you and we get the federal funding that's available. We don't have the capacity to compete for some of these grants. We don't have the capacity for some of the opportunities with brownfields, even though we need it and we need help. And that's why it's important for us to recognize the fact that there's technical assistance through the bipartisan infrastructure law, that will allow us to not only build stronger relationships, but allow those smaller communities that may not even have 1,000 members of their towns, that may only have a couple hundred. Our goal is to make sure that there's a level playing field so that generations are not left behind, especially when you look at communities in Appalachia that have not only been hit with the loss of industry, but the challenges and the impact of fentanyl. And while we understand that there are certain priorities that other agencies have that specifically focus on areas like broadband expansion, some people may say, well, that's not under the purview of the Environmental Protection Agency, so what does that mean for us? Well, we work with HHS. Public health is a huge issue for the Environmental Protection Agency. And if folks don't have broadband in rural Kentucky, rural Georgia, rural Alabama, they don't have access to telemedicine. Many of these communities are in food deserts. And one of the things I'm most proud of during the Obama administration was working with Michelle Obama on a campaign called Let's Move, which addressed childhood obesity. But the irony is in that program, we had a chance to understand food deserts and the lack of access to quality food and access to health care. And one thing that I have acknowledged and have been strongly committed to is to make sure that that interagency collaboration that was mentioned earlier is not only something that we use to check a box, but that we work with HUD, that we work with Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, with our agency within the EPA, with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And we understand and recognize how important agriculture is to the Southeast United States. And that's why this Office of Environmental Justice is so important and so critical, because we have to make sure that those communities that touch the boundaries of those areas have a chance to recover. One of the first conversations I had, Amanda, when I came into this position working with some of those leaders at our agricultural commissioners, was the way in which the pandemic disrupted the supply chain. And these are the challenges that we have to face to be able to address how we are going to move forward, not only in the months to come, but for years to come, as we see stronger storms, as we see flooding get more intense. You all in Kentucky know that better than most places. When we look at the challenges in Fort Myers, Florida, and other areas throughout the state of Florida and in South Carolina that were overwhelmingly impacted by Hurricane Ian. And our goal is not to accept it as commonplace, but to understand how to best position funding and resources into states that can allow their areas to leverage that kind of work. That $50 billion that I mentioned is important because states and individuals like those of you in this room need to know what you have access to. In the state of Florida, they get $270 million per year for the next 5 years. In Georgia, $158 million. Water infrastructure alone is absolutely critical for our viability in our towns, our cities, our communities, and that includes wastewater management. It includes an ability for communities like those, and that specifically in Jackson, Mississippi, can have a generation that does not grow up with a boil water advisory, but grows up with access to water every time they turn their faucets on. In the greatest and most prosperous country in the world, the least we can do as leaders in this room, not just as federal agencies, is to be bridges and pipelines to communities that have been left out of the conversation for too long. And our goal is to make sure that we take significant action under President Biden's approach to embed these opportunities and to solve these problems. This includes the Department of Justice collaboration that we've used on the enforcement side. Now, I'll get into some of the funding structures that we have, but one thing we're really proud about is being able to work with agencies intentionally, right? It's one thing to check a box on diversity and inclusion and what that means. I just did a podcast interview that really went well, and one of the questions that was asked was, how does diversity and inclusion in these different areas, how does that have a direct impact on the agency, on the work we're doing? And the reality of that question is that it goes so much further than just race and equity. It's so much more than that. It's making sure that there's representation in rooms that are just like this, but also to make sure and ensure that in our recruiting, in our investments, in our resource allocation, we're hearing the voices of those who too often are not represented. There is a tremendous opportunity to engage more young people where they are and to open more doors, and that's a direct impact. When you think of historically black colleges, for example, we have so many opportunities in science and engineering. And for too long, many of these schools, minority-serving institutions that have high Hispanic populations, HBCUs, tribal institutions, Too often these communities are the bearers of the challenges and the dilemmas. But I'm here to, really arguably saying, I hate to keep putting Tony on the spot, but, when you have a state like Kentucky that runs the way you all run, it's advantageous for us to make sure that the best and most talented and qualified people are in these spaces to make sure that we can recruit a future that looks like many of these areas that are struggling the most. My entry point into this environmental space was after Hurricane Katrina. And the reality was, when I was in college, no one told me about environmental issues. No one told me or introduced me about the Army Corps of Engineers or FEMA. I learned by default. And so our job is to change that narrative, not just for black and brown children, but to let these young people know what the future looks like. The future looks like that lobby. When you go by some of the booths and you go by some of these spaces and you see these numbers on what Kentucky contributes and how students at the University of Kentucky are being brought into conversations, we have to replicate that beyond these rooms. And my challenge to each of you in here today is beyond this conference to make sure that you take something away of significance that will not only inspire young people to want to take on these positions. I got a gut punch a couple of months ago when one of my staff members shared with me that we have 55 engineers that are eligible for retirement right now. I have 862 people that work with me in my region. 55 of those engineers can tell me tomorrow, Daniel, it's been real, we've had a good time, but we're retiring. That is a good but a very scary problem to have, because our challenge is not only competing with state agencies that need that talent. Our goal is to be able to say, how can we encourage young people to see these positions and these careers as viable opportunities that will take us and take them into the future? And it's important for us to articulate that, because too often we're in these rooms and we're occupying these spaces, but I think one of the biggest hurdles that we have to consider is, what does the future of work look like for all of us? What does the future of work look like in Region 4? What does it look like for Department of Energy, for EPA, for the state of Kentucky? What does it really look like? So our barriers, in my opinion, are also opportunities that we have to make some of the conversations we have around environmental justice and climate change exciting, and to meet these young people and to meet these students where they are, but also to engage the community in ways that may or may not have traditionally been some of those kind of entry points and catalysts that have encouraged them to be a part of our agency and to be a part of our conversations. Some of the things that we've done that have come out of the White House include the Clean Air and Buildings Challenge and the Inflation Reduction Act, which I'll touch on very briefly. I don't know about you all. How many people have kids? Just raise your hand really quickly. That same amount of hands should have been excited when they got back out the house and back into school. I was very happy to know that I love spending time with my children, but they needed to stop eating all my food. They needed to stop being in front of that TV all day and me dropping them off every 5 minutes. So I was very happy to do that. But we also know, with kids back in school and the rest of us returning in many instances to our workplaces, that there's no better time to talk about the White House's call to action on the Clean Air and Buildings Challenge, focusing on improving ventilation and indoor air quality that will reduce the risk of spreading diseases, including what we saw with COVID-19. Taking decisive action to advance environmental justice and climate change are both areas where this administration has called for a whole-of-government approach, where EPA is complemented by the initiatives and the opportunities made by other federal agencies. And I can't tell you all enough how exciting it is to work with federal agencies that want to come together. And again, thank you for your words and your comments earlier, because it is a very small window for us to be able to roll out the programs and the resources that are available, and to make sure that rooms like this leave not only encouraged and excited, but you all leave knowing that we recognize a very critical time that many generations haven't experienced. I wasn't alive during the New Deal. I can't tell you what type of transformation that created outside of what the history books taught my generation. But I can tell you that the Inflation Reduction Act, I can tell you that the bipartisan infrastructure law and how we're going to be able to transform and restructure our roads and our bridges and our communities and our infrastructure as it relates to water is very critical. Across Region 4, the climate work outlined in the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law is extremely important. and resources that have been allocated through these programs include us transitioning diesel emission buses to cleaner buses. I don't want to keep bragging on that F-150, but what I do know is that our buses need to be clean as well. And we recently announced $5 billion, $1 billion per year over the next 5 years to convert America's school bus fleet to cleaner energy solutions and options in states like Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Florida, all the states within our region and around the United States. The exciting thing about that is that we had a goal initially of 290 applications. We got 2,114 applications. So we very much exceeded our goal. But the challenge is in a state like Georgia, when you have 186 school districts, with 141 that have populations of 20% or higher that are living at or below poverty, that is an issue. Because it no longer goes to a program that we're celebrating and exciting about. It now goes to a crisis in our communities where young men and women that are supposed to be able to go to school to learn are missing school days because of asthma. Where communities that have been left out of conversations time and time again, that are overwhelmingly and disproportionately impacted by respiratory illness, are seeing higher numbers of struggle and lack of access to supportive services when they're impacted by pandemics like COVID-19. A couple more things that I want to share is that'll be important, so I want to make sure I stay within time so that I can get invited back to Kentucky. It's crucial for us to recognize the importance of where our space is, and for you all to know that we have a total of 55 coastal and inland river ports in the region that together account for 25% of total U.S. imports and exports. These ports are situated near or next to environmental justice communities, and we want to make sure that we keep that as a priority. As you heard earlier with Justice 40, as part of this whole of government approach and effort, we're working to support the President's Justice 40 initiative, which is absolutely critical. I'm on my way to Memphis as we speak to meet with community groups and organizations. We started off our Journey to Justice tour in Mississippi, and to continue to make sure that they understand that we're focused on 40% of federal investments in climate, clean energy, and affordable and sustainable housing, including clean water and other investments into these communities, is critical, and it's a priority of us, not only in the next 2 years, but for the next decade. It's a critical opportunity for us to invest in the cleanup and legacy pollution, to create clean energy jobs in overburdened communities, and to address the issue that I mentioned earlier about the fact that we are going to have to refill jobs in what has been called a silver tsunami. How do we address this issue, promote from within, but also one thing we have to understand is the talent that's in this room can't be replaced. Some of you have 30 and 40 years in an industry that is going to be critical for us to bring young people into. We're going to have to promote from within our organizations and our entities, but we also have to make sure that that knowledge is transferred so that we're not reinventing the wheel throughout this period. In closing, it was mentioned about the $50.6 billion that we have through bill SRF grants to the states, tribes, and territories. By program, I believe that's around $112 million in the state of Kentucky. I mentioned the $5 billion for school bus programs, the 5.3 billion in cleanup, revitalization, and recycling. And also that includes Superfund remedial cleanups that we're really excited about, not only because of the opportunity, but because of the total amount of communities that we know needs that support and needs that help. Our focus today and our commitment to this state and to our country is to make sure that each and every policy, including the struggles and the challenges that we faced and talked about PFAS and other emerging contaminants, are addressed. Kentucky is doing a great job, and our goal is not to come into a state and try to, make the policy more confusing, but to work with states to enhance the program so that other states that may not have the model that a state like Kentucky has can be replicated. We're heavily involved with these areas. We're very much committed to where we want to be and what we want to do, but we do know that we don't have to sacrifice a strong economy for a healthy community. We are learning from you all every single day. We are very, very much committed to listening, to understand, and not just to respond, nor are we solely interested in checking a box. There are going to be things, Tony, that we do that you all agree with and that we can be supportive on, and there are going to be areas where we're going to have to work together to come and find common ground and to be more of an asset to our communities and a detriment. And one thing that I don't think any of us would argue is that we love our country, We love Kentucky. We love our children. We love our democracy. And we are tasked with the inevitable reason to protect it and to pass something on better than what we inherited. I want to thank the state of Kentucky. I want to thank all of you that are here, and I want to give you all, from the administrator, our appreciation for how we're able to work with states like Kentucky, and the example that many of you all have given is truly, truly a North Star in where we desire to be, not only with this administration, but for administrations to come. Thank you all so much, and I appreciate it.